Willingness. This is by Swami Kriyabans. Willingness must be cultivated deliberately. It is an attitude of mind and depends not on outward conditions. Most people are willing or unwilling, depending on their likes and dislikes. This habit tends to develop a bias towards unwillingness, which gradually becomes chronic and attracts to itself chronic failure. Don't wait for favorable circumstances to awaken willingness in you. Train yourself in the attitude of saying yes to life. Often, by this simple attitude, you will find success arriving unexpected at your door. The affirmation: I welcome everything that comes to me.
I welcome everything that comes to me
as an opportunity for further growth.
as an opportunity for further growth.
I welcome everything that comes to me
I welcome everything that comes to me
as an opportunity for further growth.
as an opportunity for further growth.
I welcome everything that comes to me
I welcome everything that comes to me
as an opportunity for further growth.
as an opportunity for further growth.
A little more quietly with deep attention. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth.
As an opportunity for further growth.
I welcome everything that comes to me
I welcome everything that comes to me
as an opportunity for further growth.
as an opportunity for further growth.
And now in a whisper, I welcome everything that comes to me
I welcome everything that comes to me
as an opportunity for further growth.
as an opportunity for
I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. And now silently, with deep attention of the spiritual eye, I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. And please pray silently with me. Lord, help me to overcome the satanic pull of unwillingness. The more I embrace life in your name, the more I feel your joy. Om Shanti Shanti.
Good morning, and again, Happy New Year to you all and to everyone that's tuning in via the internet. This first reading is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Ananda. Entitled, O Divine Sculptor, Chisel Thou my life. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by thee. O divine sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. And from the New Path by Swami Kriyananda, this is drawn from the chapter on 29 poems. This was in the late 40s, early 50s, during Christmas time and New Year's. The following day, Master gave Kriya Yoga initiation, primarily, if not entirely, to the renunciates. As I approached him for his blessing, I prayed mentally for his help in developing divine love. After I'd been touched by him at the Christ Center, I opened my eyes to find him smiling at me blissfully. Toward the end of the initiation ceremony, Master said, "Lots of angels have passed through this room today." And then these thrilling words of promise. Of those present, there'll be a few siddhas, and quite a few jivan muktas. On New Year's Eve, we gathered in the main chapel for midnight meditation, again led by Master. At one point, During the proceedings, he beat a large gong, softly, and then with gradually increasing volume, alternating, decreasing, and increasing the volume in waves. Imagine this is the sound of Om, he told us, spreading outward to infinity. At the same instant, 100 miles south in Encinitas, another group of disciples was meditating in the main room of the hermitage. They too heard the gong, as Master was striking it. One of the monks told me it was as though it was being struck in the hallway, just outside the room we are in. The meditation that followed at Mount Washington was enthralling. Midnight came. Suddenly, waves of noise sweeping up from the city below and inward from the surrounding neighborhood. Factory whistles, car horns, shouts, as countless celebrants ushered in the new year. The door of a neighboring house opened, and a voice with a tone almost of desperation shouted into the night, "Happy New Year!" What a contrast between the frantic, emotional excitement and the sounds that were being unleashed by the thousands of celebrants around us, and the calm, expanding soul joy we experience in ourselves, in the sublime peace of our little chapel. And how blessed I reflected, how wonderful it was to be in this holy place, at the feet of my divine Guru. I prayed that the new year would bring me an ever-deepening awareness of God's love. And this last little reading is from Frank Laubach. This was a little book many, many years ago that Swami Kriyananda there at the Crystal Hermitage read to us. And he might have been in seclusion, and I'm not sure now, but I remember the experience very vividly because it was very profound. And he had the experience sometime during this period of meeting Frank Laubach in person in Davis, California. And he was very, very struck by the depth of this very, very inspired soul. And Frank Laubach, with a sense of humor, said, though Swami didn't know he was being humorous at the time, he said, "I'm dying from a dread disease." And Swami was, feeling with all compassion, what might it be? And then Frank Laubach smiled and said, "Old age." So these are letters. Very interestingly, Frank Laubach had been a Christian missionary for many years, and at one point he was asked to go to the Philippines. And he found himself extremely lonely. His family couldn't be with him at the time. And so his heart was just aching with loneliness. And he thought, what can he do about that? And so he began this incredible experience, experiments really in divine communion, drawing God in as friend and companion. And so these are letters. This is the last one of this little book that he wrote home to his son back in the 30s, January 2nd, 1932, entitled "Learn to Hold God by the Hand and Rest." In school, a teacher lays out work for his pupils. I resolve to accept each situation of this year as God's layout for that hour, and never to lament that it is very commonplace or a disappointing task. One can pour something divine into every situation. One of the mental characteristics against which I have rebelled most is the frequency of my blank spells. When I cannot think of anything worth writing, and sometimes can't remember names. Henceforth, I resolve to regard these as God's signal that I am to stop and listen. Sometimes you want to talk to your son, and sometimes you want to hold him tight in silence. God is that way with us. He wants to hold us still, with us in silence. Here's something we can share with all the people in the world. They cannot all be brilliant or rich or beautiful. They cannot all even dream beautiful dreams like God gives some of us. They cannot all enjoy music. Their hearts do not all burn with love. But everybody can learn to hold God by the hand and rest. And when God is ready to speak, and fresh thoughts of and when God is ready to speak, the fresh thoughts of heaven will flow in like a crystal spring. Everybody rests at the end of the day. What a world gain if everybody could rest in the waiting arms of the Father and listen until He whispers. Yesterday, Roma told me a very interesting story, and so I wanted to share it with you today. She read of this very, very young child, probably somewhere around 2 years old, that was having these dreams. And they were really nightmares, where he was in a situation, a room, whatever it might have been, that he couldn't get out of. And so his parents were, doing all that they could to help him through this experience. And it was very hard. And then at one point, when he was a little bit older, 3 or 4, they took him to an air show. And remember, this is just a little boy. And so at one point, he was drawn to this large aircraft bomber. And he just walked right in, and the people with him, perhaps his parents, began to be absolutely astonished when he began to point out, there's this, there's that. He was completely familiar with the aircraft. And they just didn't know what to think about it. And one person there, perhaps he was on staff, said, oh, this is this particular instrument. And the little boy corrected him. He says, no, it's not. It's this. And he was right. And so as time went on, the parents, of course, and others were very, very astonished, because this is not exactly something that happens on a daily basis. And they began to explore and research what this might have been all about. And they began to think, well, maybe we should look into the history of World War II and the flights there in Japan and so forth, in that area of the war. And sure enough, as they did, and the story gets even more astonishing, they began to get clues that he was there during that time, and that he had been shot down in a bomber and had perished. Well, what was extraordinary was that he found, apparently in that incarnation, a very recent one, he was very, very much loved, and he was very, very intelligent, and held in great respect by those that were there with him in the squadron. And incredibly, it could only be a hand of God. There were members of the squadron that were still alive. And mind you, these were no longer young men. These were now men in their 80s. And they began to converse with this boy, and there was an instant familiarity. As a matter of fact, his previous name was now his current name. And they were just amazed at what he knew, and they were absolutely convinced, because even the characteristics of this little boy were in many ways identical to the characteristics of the man that they knew and loved. Well, these kinds of stories don't happen all that often, even to devotees. And I reflected thinking, what an amazing thing that God does from time to time. It was the karma of this squadron, after having this very, very deep and tragic experience, to have the soul come back and find them. But now, under complete disguise, now he's just a little boy, and they're grown men, seniors. And I thought, whether this new year, 2017, brings us very much a routine experience. We go about our day and we do what we can to practice the presence of God. Or perhaps we have experiences, maybe not quite as shocking as this, that really do give us a bit of a shock, and a shock in a good way. Remember, Yogananda talked about ecstasy being the liberating shock of omnipresence. What does that speak of? For us to get ready for the little shocks in order for the big shock. And what is more shocking, really, when you think of it, to think of what we were like before we got on the spiritual path. It really was like another incarnation. And then all of a sudden, God came along, perhaps in a very humble way, giving us a book, a friend coming to us and saying, well, you know, as Roma experienced many years ago, a friend came up to her and she said, how would you like to come and see a direct disciple of a liberated master, Paramahansa Yogananda, speaking at East-West Bookstore in Palo Alto? And she said, no, that was quite a lot to think about. A master and a direct disciple and their inner locale and all of this. And her friend was always taking her to all of these different things. And so she thought, oh, well, here we go. Let's see. And when she walked in to that little bookstore in Menlo Park, there was Swami. There were many of the disciples and so forth there. And she felt it was home. And so, as we were reading from this beautiful book, Letters by a Modern Mystic, our job is to do what we can. As Yogananda said, silence is God. Do what we can to put to the side our desires, so that if God wants to give us outwardly a seemingly routine year, just to see him doing dishes and going to work and all the various things, well, is that a write-off? Is that not spectacular enough for us? Well, we shouldn't have that attitude. We should have the thought that as we are striving day after day, and again, this year will go by with lightning speed, God is going to be doing what he can to reach out to us and say, can I be your companion during this moment? During a moment of trial, perhaps. During a moment that is very, very mundane. During a moment which is a great surprise. Can I be with you? And all we have to do is to say yes. As Roma was reading about the importance of being willing. When we give our satsangs, very often the one who's doing the affirmation will say, shall I pick one? We think, sure, because it's going to be a surprise. And so I saw the little bookmark. She was out of the room, and I saw willingness. I said, wow, it's perfect for this new year. Absolutely perfect. And what gets in the way of our willingness? This tendency not to be wanting any bit of stillness. We want to find ways to embrace diversion after diversion, lest we have to face the music, strange as it sounds, of our own soul. But if in this year, and of course it's a good thing to make a New Year's resolution, and we'll have to decide for ourselves what that is, for us, it would be a very good thing at least to think in terms of inner stillness. Stillness is God. So that we don't miss the road signs. Because there are road signs every moment. God is saying, turn left, turn right, go frontward, turn around and go backward. All kinds of things come our way. And if we are in this state, more and more of desirelessness, then we find that with ease, we begin to think, it's time to reprioritize my life. What I want to do is, thy will be done. What I want to do is to eagerly, enthusiastically find ways that I can push a good thing forward. Because all God wants from us is our love. All He wants for us is that we get into alignment, into balance, that we're centered, so that when He gives us these opportunities, they don't pass us by. And so, in this new year, let's see what we can do to, and it may be just a moment in a day, but it's a good start. It may be a few moments in a day where we actually can still the mind sufficiently, still the heart sufficiently, that we can say with humility and with eagerness, with joyous expectation, I'm still as I can be. What do you have in mind? And many times, through that willingness, through that openness, then God says, oh, I'm so happy that you're standing still at last. I do have something for you. And a bright thought of inspiration comes. Or a friend calls. Or we reread the autobiography of a yogi with new enthusiasm and find things that we think we'd never read before. Because at that particular time, for whatever reason, it passed us by. And now this new thought jumps off the page and it speaks of reform. As Yogananda said, refashion life ideally. That's what we want to do. And so the place that God has placed us is perfect. How could it be otherwise? God is perfect. He does a perfect job. He's doing a perfect job by us. And so our job is to see what we can do to reach out a hand so that we can begin more and more to strive for perfection. As it says in the Bible, be ye there perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I think of all the ways that that must be interpreted along with other things in the Bible. As Yogananda said, Christ was crucified once, but His teachings have been crucified every day thereafter. And so when we think of this calling, ye two are God, be ye therefore perfect, then what does it speak of? It speaks of a very high bar, but it's not something that's unattainable. Because as children of God, we have been given the sufficient strength and the attunement and help to strive for the heights and to reach them, which of course we all will. And I'll leave you with a parting thought. And it's one really to circulate in your mind as often as you can. Yogananda said, I remember that time. And at that point he was still striving. I remember that time when God came to me. And it surpassed everything that I thought possible. The light, the bliss, the love that came at that moment. And that was a moment of liberation for him. And so think of that. There is that point in time where the striving will be put to the side and we will have finally arrived. Live in that moment. That moment is reality. This moment appears to be reality, but it's not. We're dreaming. And so as we embrace inner stillness, as we embrace willingness, as we embrace joy as our own, then think of the help that we will be given this year and for the remainder of our lives until we take our last breath. And the help that we are being given by God the Guru and by the Gurus and by our spiritual family, we can't measure that. We can't measure it. Why? Because it's infinite, absolutely infinite. The light striving to penetrate our minds, our hearts, our souls. And so, God bless you. We wish you a happy new year. And more than a happy new year, a joyous new year. Joy is God and God is joy. And we hope that we can be willing instruments, touching lives of anyone who crosses our path, giving them the light of God as it flows through us. So, God bless you, and again,